the muscular system, also called skeletal muscular system. And there's a chapter, of course, in the lab book. And right here, it has all the nice pictures that you're gonna learn. Muscle Man right here, and it's all labeled. And I did want to point out in the back of this chapter, depending upon what version you have, they always have a practice version of Muscle Man right here, and it's multiple choice. So you might want to try that. I don't know if the SI gives this out or not, but anyway, it is in the back of that chapter in the muscle section. They also have a muscle head that you'll be learning, and there it is. And these are in black and white, but at least they sort of help. Exactly. All right, and so going back here, just showing you what's in the muscular system. So then we have muscle head, which you have to learn. And then it shows you origins and insertions, how muscles are attached to bones and or cartilage. And then as you go through, here's the wrist right here. And there's extra dense regular and simple squamous bands, like almost ace bandages going around here to reinforce your ankles and your wrist. And those are called a retinaculum, and they're actually a form of a tendon. They're actually a tendon that wraps around and reinforces. So they're on the wrist and they're also on the ankles. So there's pictures of those. So you can just go through and look at some of these. And also here's the knee with the quadriceps tendon, a close-up of that. And then of course, the patellar ligament is below the patella. So those are nice pictures, but you don't have to know all that. And so there you go. All right, so what do you have to know? You have to know, besides Muscle Man, anterior and posterior, and the head, muscle head, then we have notes on the muscular system. Right. Now we're going to go over the muscular system notes that are posted on Moodle. And right here, you'll see them front and back. So there's 2 pages right there. And a lot of the information that's listed on this note sheet, you've had some of it when we did the muscle tissue histology. So the first thing you want to know in the muscular system, and of course they are skeletal muscles, there are 650 of them. That's what most books say. Some say 675, but that just means they probably divided up the 650 into more individual little pieces to make 675. So 650 is the general number for the number of skeletal muscles in the muscular system. Now, how many are we going to learn? We're just going to learn 59 superficial muscles. So superficial means they're directly, if I just peel back the skin, they're superficial. They're underneath the skin. And so muscles come in like 3 layers. Superficial, then there's going to be a middle layer, a medial layer, and then the deep muscles. And so we are going to concentrate on the superficials. And then we're going to learn 19 head and neck ones. So that's a total of 78 for learning those off of our Muscle Man pictures in the lab book. All right, so now we have 2 sets of organs for every system. We always have primary organs, and then we have secondary organs. And so primary organs do the main functions for the system. And what are they in the muscular system? Why, they're skeletal muscles, they're tendons, and the brain helps this system, absolutely. So what do the skeletal muscles do? Well, the first thing they do is they move the body, okay? They move the body, and so the whole body or individual areas. They protect internal organs, all right? Maintains posture. And why do you want to maintain good posture with your muscles? So that your internal organs can work correctly. You don't want them to get squashed and out of shape, because then things can't move through them. And then also the muscles produce a lot of body heat with their contraction, and also with the contraction they create strength, right? And then the last thing they do, facial muscles, basically what are they going to do? They're going to help you chew, help you talk, make expressions, and so that's what the facial muscles basically concentrate on. All right, so now the second organ in the system would be tendons. And so what are tendons? Tendons are made out of simple squamous and dense reg CT, okay? always, simple squamous, ET, dense reg, CT, and they're going to attach your muscles to bone or cartilage, okay? And so you have to attach them to something, otherwise your muscles won't work. They'll contract, but they won't move anything. And then what else do tendons do? They stabilize the joints. So along with the ligaments from the bones, they're gonna help stabilize the joints so they're not so movable and flexible. All right, and then the last primary organ that's associated with the muscular system is the cerebellum. The cerebellum is the hindbrain, and it controls gross motor movements. So the word gross right here, gross, means you can physically see it with your eyes, okay? It's not a little bitty movement, hidden movement. Gross motor movements means you can see the big movement, right? So that's what the cerebellum does, the hindbrain. It controls all of that. And then there's a part up here underneath the parietal bones. It's part of the cerebrum. And so this part of the brain, the parietal lobe, is going to fine-tune the movements of your muscles. So when you go bowling, yes, you can throw it, but then if you want to try to put some spin on it or try to pick something in the corners, that is called fine-tuning, right? And so that's what the cerebrum does in the parietal lobe. It's going to fine-tune your muscular movements, and also it creates, you're going to store muscle memory in the parietal lobe right here, parietal lobe. And so that muscle memory means if you don't bowl for the next 20 years, then the next time you go after 20 or 25, 30 years, then when you get up there after a couple throws, you're going to start remembering how to bowl again, like a 300 average bowler, right? And so anyway, that happens in any kind of sport or activity. And so that has to do with the cerebrum. And then we have a few extra muscles over the bottom of the front page of the notes. And on the board, I have listed the 11 things that we actually use to name the muscles or help describe them. And so the first thing we use a lot are just the general landmark body terms or general locations in the body. You'll find a lot of those landmarks being used in the muscle names. Then the second thing we can use are bone names or the attachment sites for the bones are included in the muscle name. Then the third one, body surfaces, like a dorsal, ventral, anterior, and posterior should be under here. Posterior, and so those are body surfaces. Those are used a lot. Then number 4, type of joint movements produced, like flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, rotation. All those are very common in muscle names. And then number 5, speed of contraction. Now this is not as common in the name of muscles, but the speed of contraction is either slow or fast twitch right there. And then the geometric shape, of course, is used a lot in describing or naming muscles. And so if it's deltoid, it means the muscle shape looks like a triangle, all right? And then if it's an orbit, it should be circular in shape, like around your mouth, orbicularis, in your eyes. And then rectus means long, like a rectangle shape. And then we have trapezius, should be like a trapezoid shape on the back. All right, and then another item that we use is the origin and insertion sites for your muscles. So you all know biceps. So the biceps, the heads are split, and so here to here to here. And so then the triceps is going to be split into 3, or it could be the quadriceps, which means 4 heads to the muscle right there. And then we go to number 8, direction the muscle runs. So the best example there is if it's growing on an, actually going on an angle, it would be called an oblique muscle right there. Then the length of the muscle, when they use the term longus, it just means it's a very long muscle. Brevis means it's very short. And then the overall size of the muscle, these 3 terms, if it's a large muscle, they call it maximus. If it's medium size, medius. And then if it's a little bitty muscle, minimus. And then the last thing they can use to name muscles is the color of the muscle. Is it a light color or is it a dark color? And that has to do with the amount of blood vessels in it and the amount of oxygen, light and dark muscles. So those are all the things that can be used to help describe your skeletal muscles in the muscular system. Back of the muscle note sheet, there are some general things, generalities, that are common to all the skeletal muscles in the muscular system. So now we're going to go over those, but before I do, I have a little picture here with some terms that you need to understand. So I drew a bone right here, and then two bones down here, and then the green is the muscle, and they call the main part of the muscle the belly, muscle belly. And then here are the tendons. So this muscle has two tendons attaching it. And so they call the tendons, that area, the head of the muscle, okay, the head of the muscle. And so down here, this muscle will come down and it splits, and one tendon goes to one bone and one goes to another. So this would be like the distal head tendons of the muscle. And then we have the joint area in the middle, which that's no big deal. All right, so we use the term proximal heads for the tendons that are up here on the bone, all right? And so do they all have to have two heads to them? No. A lot of muscles just have one head, one big tendon attaching it to a bone. So the area up here where the proximal heads are, the proximal head tendons, essentially these are a non-movable area. They don't produce any movement. This is going to stabilize the muscle, hold it to the bone, and make it nice and firm and stable, produces no movement. So what do we call this area of the tendons that are going to attach the muscle to a bone and produce no movement? We call that the origin site, the site of origin, okay? And then when the muscle contracts, it's going to move these bones because the tendons are going to move up with the muscle contracting. And so they call these tendons the distal heads, but these tendons are going to produce, with contraction, some movement. And so this is called the insertion site. So the insertion tendons down here are always the distal ones that will produce the movement, all right? So that's how you use those terms in this picture. Now there's two other terms that are loosely used by doctors to describe some injuries to muscles. And here are the two, strain and sprain. So technically, when you say something is strained, a muscle is strained, or you have a strain somewhere in the body, it means the muscles or the tendons have been injured or overextended, and so they're sore or something's happened to them. So that's a strain pertaining to muscles and tendons only. But then when they say you have a sprain technically is injury or overextension of ligaments that attach bones to bone or bone to cartilage. So doctors sort of lump it all together when you have like a sprain. They're also talking tendons and the ligaments and possibly the muscles also. So anyway, those are the technical definitions for strain and sprain. Now over here, I have listed the generalities that are on the backside of the muscle note sheet. And I'm just going to run through these real quickly. A lot of you probably know some of this information. So first thing I can say is that all muscles work in pairs. So when one muscle contracts, another one has to relax. So when your bicep contracts, the triceps are all relaxing. So they all work in pairs. Then atrophy. The term atrophy means to decrease the size of a muscle with age or even with injury or non-use of a muscle. So atrophy can occur from many different things, but all muscles will atrophy with age unless you keep working them out or you take steroids like testosterone to make them become larger and maintain their shape. So atrophy, if a muscle gets smaller, a lot of times dense regular CT and fat invades, and you have less skeletal muscle tissue in the inside of the muscles. All right, to contract all your skeletal muscles, you already know this, calcium, potassium, ATP, and oxygen. And to relax your muscles, magnesium, ATP, and oxygen. All right? And so if we call it aerobic contraction, it means it's using oxygen only. And if it's anaerobic, it can use any other kind of gas to contract that muscle, okay? It can use CO2, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, it doesn't matter, hydrogen, whatever. All right, number 5 is contraction waste products. So once you contract your muscles, inside the cell, you gotta take care of the waste products, and that would be CO2, ADP, reduced ATP, and lactic acid, which is a compound that accumulates in the cytoplasm and can make your muscles sore. All right, over here we have tone. So if your muscle has tone, and when you work out and do a lot of exercising, your muscles become very toned. They have a nice shape to them. And so tone means it gives shape to the muscle. And what is happening when you have good muscle tone? Well, a lot of the muscle cells are staying slightly contracted. 50% of the muscle cells in here are staying contracted, and so it gives it good shape. Or else all of the muscle cells can stay contracted and really hold the shape of the muscle. Then we have the term flaccid, pertaining to muscles that can't contract anymore. A lot of people that are bedridden or have some severe disabilities, they develop flaccid muscles, so they can't contract at all. Then we have the term rigor mortis. This is more associated with death. When you have no oxygen available for the muscle cells, then they stay contracted and they produce stiffness, and eventually sometimes they will relax, but a lot of times they will not. And so that is called rigor mortis. No oxygen available to relax them. And then the neurotransmitter that all muscle cells like to use, skeletal muscle, is ACH, acetylcholine. And then the inhibitor, neuroinhibitor, that'll stop the muscle contraction is cholinesterase, all right? And then the last 2 groups of things to go over. On the top, we have contraction terms, okay? Contraction terms. And so isotonic. And so if you say, I can see isotonic contractions, that means you can easily see me moving my arm, and that's called isotonic. If it's isometric and you're sitting in my classroom, well, you could be squeezing your gluteal muscles and I don't even know it, but you're still toning those muscles. And so isometric are muscle contractions that you can't see. And so gross movement means you're able to see it with your eyes. And so isometrics are muscle contractions that you can't see. Then tetanic. Tetanic means a muscle stays contracted. It will not relax, and so you need magnesium, you need more oxygen, and some ATP to relax it. So it's like tetanus. Your jaw can go into tetanus. Any kind of cramp, all cramps in the body are a form of tetanic contraction. It stays contracted, it's having a hard time relaxing. Eventually it will relax for the most part. And then the last 3, the last terms right here, the first 3 you might be have heard of, but the last one you probably haven't. So these terms are called muscle movement groups, okay? Muscle movement groups. And so when you actually contract your muscles to produce movement, visible movement, they call these prime mover muscles. So there might be a lot of muscles basically flexing my arm. And so all of them are generally called prime movers. Visible movement, easy to see. Then antagonistic muscles are the ones that relax, all the muscles that are going to relax while you're doing your big prime movement. Exactly. Synergistic movements, muscle groups, synergistic muscle groups means these are the ones that fine-tune your movement. Fine-tune your movement so that if you want to go out to the side, up, down, whatever, those are synergistic muscle groups. And then the last muscle groups are called fixators. And fixators are always around major joints in the body, and they're stabilizing the joint so that it will not be flexible and it will hold its shape so it can do its functions. And so where are your fixators? Around your major joints, which are where? Your shoulder, your pelvis, your knee, and your ankle, right? That's where you got the major fixators. So that's everything you need to know about the muscular system in the human body.